Welcome back for another Jenny video here, and we're going to be doing another box opening and review. And today we're going a little bit different. We have reviewed some Oxford Rail items in the past, but this is the new 4-plank wagon that they've just recently introduced, and this is of a Scottish prototype. I think that the 4-plank wagon were a staple of some of the Scottish railway companies, and this particular one is in the livery of the North British Railway Company, but I do know that the private owner liveries that have been introduced are all of Scottish prototypes. I'm not sure how far south these travelled in terms of companies that were using them. But certainly the North British liveried one, it's quite possible that as I think potentially a common user wagon, or certainly one which could travel more widely, it's entirely plausible for layouts set all over the country in the pre-grouping period to feature one of these wagons. So it's a good excuse to add one of these to the itinerary of rolling stock. It's in the pretty standard Oxford Rail boxes. The grade of cardboard they use is actually somewhat thinner than the Hornby and the Bachmann type, so I can't see these boxes lasting as well as those type of boxes, but no matter. Inside, the pretty familiar plastic insert. We don't get the little piece of shiny plastic in the bottom there to protect from rubbing, although it has to be said that these haven't really suffered for not having that. One of the first things which I noticed, we've got a few quite nice separately applied details. So we've got the hinges, they're made of wire, separately applied. And the other thing as well I've noticed is that some of the other detail, like the stanchions on the other end, are actually, it appears, to be, separately applied details. So it is actually a very well put together wagon. I think the prototypes date from about the 1890s, but obviously this is depicting a wagon in the later stage of North British Railway ownership. It's got sprung buffers instead of dumb buffers. We have couplings in NEM pockets, and again there is a representation of the underside detail, but I think it's detail for the sake of having it rather than anything else, because normally you wouldn't actually see any of this under the wagon. We've got separately applied handbrake levers, and it's nice to see that we've got this very primitive style of brake rigging, which is, I presume, pretty much in keeping with the original. The W-irons and the axle boxes do look a bit of a thick moulding, but nonetheless they seem to look alright from a distance. It should also be noted that the entire floor of this wagon in there, that's a one-piece moulding. So all of these W-irons, they're all part of that moulding, which is something a bit different. I've not really seen that before. But what it does mean is that the entire upper part of this wagon is all one of a different moulding, apart from the separately applied detail. And it does actually mean that some of this is picked out quite nicely as a result. We can see there the door springs. I presume they must be a separately applied detail, but they're actually so well done. They do look like the real deal. It's very difficult to see the difference between them and the underframe where they attach. That is actually really nicely done. And we've also got some nice crisp printing on the sole bars there. The N and the B of the North British and the little cross logo, which appears on there, are really crisply done. And actually, it's worth noting these little cross motifs here. You would see a kind of a pictorial representation on a lot of wagons from the pre-grouping period. There's things like a Staffordshire knot, crossed keys, things like that. And the reason for that was quite simply because back then so many people of the working classes actually couldn't read or write. So it was far easier to identify ownership of wagons for staff if they had a very distinctive picture rather than relying on the numbers and letters. And that's one of the reasons that different railway companies went for their different unique pictorial representation. There's not really a lot of other things that can be said about this. We've got a fairly basic representation of the internal planking and internal detail. The end door there, with its vertical planking, it looks really good from the outside, but when you look down on it, that plastic does look rather thick, noticeably thicker than the other three sides. But that said, I think it's only a minor problem for a wagon that really it should be commended. The Oxford Rail have gone to these lengths to produce what is essentially a pure pre-grouping wagon. And it's something that really the likes of Bachmann and Hornby have kind of dabbled with deliveries, but not with the actual wagons that they're applied to. Now, this particular prototype would have certainly lasted through to, I think it would have been absorbed into, I think it's London and North Eastern Railway that the North British became a part of. But an LNER version has not appeared in the first batch, but that's not to say that one might not appear later on. And certainly there's quite a range of private owner liveried versions that this opens up possibilities for. And with the range of pre-grouping locomotives that have been coming out of late, it really is a welcome addition to finally get some period rolling stock that's suitable to run with them. And even though I've not seen any North British Railway liveried locomotives turning up, indeed I'm not even sure whether any North British Railway prototypes have appeared ready to run. As I said before, this wagon would have travelled off the North British system and therefore is probably suitable to run with things like the Oxford Rail Adams Radial in the London and South Western Railway livery, and indeed a lot of other locomotives that have appeared from other manufacturers in pre-grouping liveries. Now, one other thing which there is a bit of a question mark around is the shade of grey. This seems pretty light. Now, Hornby had a dabble at a 3-plank wagon in North British livery, and that was a much darker grey. And it has to be said that records from the period aren't particularly good in terms of, well, there aren't really any colour photographs, so nobody is actually quite sure what colour these wagons really were. So you can't really say definitive which is correct, the Hornby one or the Oxford Rail one. But I think it looks the part, and certainly it's a fine addition to any pre-grouping rolling stock collection. Anyway, I hope this has been very informative to you. Don't forget to like this video and share it too. And this is me, Jenny Kirk, so you take very good care of yourself. And until next time, bye for now.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, and action.
Were you already recording?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.